Morning, everybody. I got the memo. Read. It's always great to get to this point when you put together a big event, and you know you have to introduce the speaker, and you know as soon as this is done, you can go sit down and enjoy. So, did anybody see Venus this morning? Was anybody up and saw the big bright star, which is really Venus? It was great. So, good morning, everyone. I want to thank all of you for taking your time out of this really busy schedule of yours to be with us today, and I appreciate the support of the Simsbury Chamber's Business Leader Breakfast, so thank you all for being here. I'm Charity Folk, Executive Director of the Simsbury Chamber, for those of you who don't know me. For those of you who do know me, you're probably saying, why does Charity look so different? What's different about her that wasn't there the other day or last year or some other time? What is it? And no, it's not that I'm wearing my hair a little longer, but that's not it. What you're looking at is the new Charity who is transforming into a conscious leader, who is grounded, centered, self-aware, enjoys clarity in my life, and is introspective. And I'm going to have fun doing it, and if I don't have fun doing it, then I'm not doing it right. And you're going, wait, I want what she has. I want that. So, how did this all come about? I met Winiarski and his team. I read Act Now, and at a kind invitation from Pete, I went to a one-day workshop last Friday at the Hartford Hilton on how to have the best year ever, and I want to let you know that I'm well on my way to achieving that goal. Rubber bands and all. Are you intrigued? Oh, excuse me, are you intrigued? So, it is my pleasure to tell you, or to introduce you today to today's speaker, Pete Winiarski, who's founder and CEO of Win Enterprises, LLC, which is a consulting firm with a mission to help business leaders improve their companies, something we could all use. You will see from the back of today's program a lengthy biography, but Pete has a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering and a master's in business administration. He is also a lifelong student of the principles of success and goal achievement. His book, Act Now, a daily action log for achieving your goals in 90 days, is a #1 international bestseller. After Pete's presentation today, Pete will be available for a book signing. Part of the proceeds from the sale of Act Now will go to the Business Resource Center at the Simsbury Public Library. Thank you, Pete. And with that, Pete, it's time to transform the room.
Hi, everyone. This is great seeing so many familiar faces. When you live in Simsbury and it's a Simsbury Chamber, it just so happens that you'll know someone there. This is really cool. For those of you who have seen me speak before, there's no way I'm going to be anchored at this thing. It's just not going to work. Show of hands, who's seen me in some event in the past? There's a handful of hands. That's pretty good. Thank you so much for coming back. That's a good sign we didn't scare you away. What Charity just described is really cool. We had this event on Friday, and it was designed such that we would give an experience like this for people. And if Charity comes out saying what she said of how energized she is and how excited she is to make this year her best year ever, then it's working, because that was only a week ago. So week 1 down, 51 to go. How's that? Let me cue up what we're talking about today. The idea of taking action so that you can actually have your results rock no matter what's going on around you is really what this is about. And briefly, I'll tell you about Win Enterprises, and what we do as a company and as a consulting firm is we do help to transform business leaders and transform companies, and to take results and just have them be totally different than what they were before, and then help you to sustain them. It's not about brute force, getting things in place. one time, and then as soon as you turn your back, the results go back to what they used to be. So this is the framework, the Win Holistic Transformation Model, of how we think about helping business leaders and how they can transform their companies. And that's what this is all about. So briefly, the introduction to who we are in this model, it's about alignment with your purpose, your vision, your mission, and your goals. And then it's about taking deliberate action on these 5 points of the star, where you are clear on your strategy and your strategic goals. You're applying what I call the science of success to how you do everything. And a lot of it is what you heard in Charity's introduction. And a lot of it is the methods that are proven to work and making sure that all of your employees and your teams are aware of what they are and they're thinking that way. It is about lean thinking. Our resources have a lot of depth in lean manufacturing, lean production, lean tools, lean style, of how to see processes differently, how to drive waste out, and totally transform the way that work is done. And we call that lean thinking because it's not about a bunch of tools. It's really about a shift in how you think and how you do your work. Then there's conscious leadership. Conscious leadership is about how you lead as a business leader and how you are more self-aware, as well as how you are aware of your team and how you can optimize your team, which leads us to the winning team. So who's on your team and how do you apply team-based approaches? All of that can succeed if you get your culture right. What's interesting is I was speaking to a few of you in the room before we really got started, talking about how your companies have grown. How many of you in the room have seen some growth in your business in the last few years? Lots of hands, which is good news, right? Because even though the economy hasn't been exactly the best, we're seeing growth. How many of you have grown through acquisition? Either been acquired or do the acquiring? Anytime that happens, you have two different businesses, two different cultures smashing together. So getting the culture right is a big deal. How many of you have ever said, oh, I wish we could do X, Y, Z, but our culture won't allow it? Who's guilty of that statement? Anyone? Pretty good, pretty good. So that's where culture fits in. So it's always important for you to know who's talking to you, and that's the exposure that I want to give you to Win Enterprises from a consulting model standpoint. Everything in that model applies to you as an individual as well, by the way. Today we're talking about goal achievement. And goal achievement is a skill. If you can figure it out in any one area of your life and really rocket your results in one area, it applies to every other area. Is that a good idea? Who's got goals? Raise your hand. Anyone? 2/3 of the room. How many of you have actually written your goals down on a piece of paper? Now, less than those who had their hands up before. Here's something interesting. People who have bothered to write down their goals outperform the people who have goals but didn't write them down by 42%. So do me a favor. Take out a pen and write a goal down on a piece of paper right now while you're thinking about it. Because it's worth 42% improvement, isn't it? That's pretty cool. The other thing I'd like you to do is follow along in, Kelly, can you hand me this brochure there? On your tables is this little brochure. And follow along on the inside because there are some spots where you can actually write some things. We're going to talk today about a framework that I call the 5 C's of goal achievement. And what I'd like you to do is just take some notes in the space. You'll be able to work left to right. We'll talk about what the 5 C's are. You can log those as you go. And in the middle section, there's a spot for your top goal for 2014. And because when you set a goal, you outperform people who don't, and when you write it down, you outperform people who set goals but haven't written it down yet, I want to give that to you right now so that you're actually gaining some perspective on 2014, and you'll outperform what you would have had you not written it down. Is that cool? All right, so follow along there. So go ahead and think about this question on the screen. from the perspective of you running your business, what's your biggest dream right now? Go ahead and just write something down on that piece of paper. What is the thing that would make the biggest difference for you this year? And go ahead and write that down. And while you're doing that, I'm going to give you a little perspective, because I did this exercise. In fact, one of the things that back in July we were thinking about from a business perspective, we're doing pretty well from a consulting standpoint. We want to get out and do more speaking engagements like this, big audiences, and have connection with a lot of different people. And I had a coach and an expert that I was reviewing this with. He said, well, let's take a look at your website. So we looked at winenterprisesllc.com, we looked at petewinarski.com, and she said, you know, everything's looking pretty good, but there's two things that I suggest we get on there. A best-selling book and TV appearances. Well, I ain't got none of those, right, at that moment. So that became a focus. Focus one, we had the book written. I hadn't really done a whole lot to market it. It was exciting to get the book written, and then life is busy, so I'm just going to keep going, right? I'm going to see if I can just keep making some traction and keep working with clients and have some family time and mix it all in. So turning that book into a number one was the first goal, the first dream that we had focused on. And then after we figured that out, then we would worry about the TV. Well, what's interesting, if I talk about this bestseller story, you know, it started with you had to write a great book. And then as you get into it, I had no idea what to do. I had a vague idea what to do, and that vague idea was I had to get a whole bunch of people to buy the thing. But how do you get people to buy it? So I started investing. I worked with some coaches. I went through some courses. I followed the system that they described. And what's interesting is if there's a method, if there's a process that's proven to work for other people, expect that it's going to work for you as well if you follow it. Does that make sense? So here's what's cool. That Win Holistic Transformation Model, that's a method, that's a process. We know that when people do all of the elements on there, their results rocket. I trusted that these people who were coaching me knew what they were talking about. And I followed that process. I also used the methodology that's in Act Now. It better work, right? And so I focused over the next 3 months of time. And here's what happened. That was July, that meeting. And in October 1st is what we set for the launch day. Let's get the world to buy the book on launch day. And this is what's cool. Here it is in Kindle. Here it is on Amazon.com. Categories like family health, self-help, work-life balance. And then you get to things like the UK and Canada. Stress manuals, manager's manuals, business life, leadership. These are awesome categories. And look at some of this is what really gets fun. Look at some of the progress. This happened to be from Canada, where I started at something like position 2.5 million in the hole. There's something like 12 million books on Amazon.com. I don't know how many are on Amazon Canada, but here's what's amazing. And this, you have to do screenshots and watch this and like stay up all night to see the progress and screenshot as it happens, which is kind of tough to do. By the way, I now know what it's like to be on the national level from a political office standpoint on election day, because nothing happens until the West Coast gets home from work. It's pretty late at night for us here in the East Coast. That's a big deal. So, you know, people get home from work and then they finally, have dinner and they say hi to their family, and then they go online and then they see social media posts or emails or whatever the traffic might be, and then they finally started to buy the book. So it was pretty late at night before, all of a sudden something happens. And in Canada, it went and improved 2.5 million%. I don't know what that math is, but if I can improve a result by 2.5 million%, I'm willing to take it. Is that pretty cool? So here are some of the other titles you may be familiar with. The Power of Full Engagement. This is a great book. Ken Blanchard, everyone know Ken Blanchard? I beat him on that day. That was pretty cool. Esther Hicks, Law of Attraction. Is it familiar to you? Deepak Chopra. These are pretty powerful names. There's powerful engagement again. What I circled here, most gifted. This is exciting because on that push for bestseller on that day, people were buying copies to give away. I mean, that's thrilling to me. People weren't buying just one. They were buying more than one. So that helps too. If you ever do this, talk people into buying gifts. I love Richard Branson. Everyone knows who Sir Richard Branson is, right? And here I am at this moment sandwiched between him, one of his same book, Screw It, Let's Do It. Anyone read that book? That's a fun book. It's very fast, it's very short, and it's Richard Branson. It's his style. And I think what I ought to do is take and call him up and say, we should collaborate on a book. Because look, I'll send him this page, and let's write a book called Screw It, Act Now. Now, this is a friend of mine named Anil Gupta. Just putting this up because Anil's on the list. And what's interesting, I had no idea on Amazon there were things like top rated. So here I had beaten him out on that particular day for sales, but he got me on top rated. That means when people go and you can rate a book, so I've got to build that campaign and see how we're doing versus my buddy Anil. That's a great book too that Anil wrote. Mind Gym, just another one. If you're not familiar with Mind Gym, it's a great one. Now, one of the secrets to getting huge success is get powerful, influential people with big lists, big reach to actually help you and support you. And Jack Canfield, you know who Jack Canfield is? The Success Principles is a book that if you haven't read it, I suggest putting that in your library and reading through that. Chicken Soup for the Soul. Everyone's familiar with that. That's where Jack really became in everyone's awareness. So anyway, look at the type of exposure on launch day that he was willing to put out on his blog. And you're connecting what Act Now is all about to his book, The Success Principles, as a way to really implement what he's describing in that book. So tremendous success. I'm super grateful to everyone who participated in making this happen. That was October. We decided in July. Right? My message to you is it's possible, whatever your goal is as an individual or as a business leader in your companies, that you can hit something rather significant in the next 90 days. It is absolutely possible. But here's what happens. You're busy. Who's busy? Raise your hand. Right? So you've got a lot of things going on. And which one do you pick? Or you don't have enough time. Or you're distracted. Or you have no idea how to actually achieve the goals that you set. Like, if I wanted to set a goal to become an international bestseller, what do I do first? I don't know. I got to get some help. I don't know what to do. There's ways to set goals that work and ways that don't work as well. And many of us haven't ever learned that exact process. And then the power that simple daily actions have. The power of doing simple things every single day and what that can do for you. People don't recognize what's there. So that's what I want to share with you to get you to that point today. So here's what happens. You get excited. You think this is going to be my best year ever. You set some huge goals. And then before you know it, what do I do? I've got all these things that I want to achieve. And next thing you know, work happens and stuff happens and family happens. And it becomes challenging. So we want to make sure that you're chipping away at this in a way that doesn't allow you to become overwhelmed. Because we don't want this to be the case. This could be you slamming your head on the brick wall. So I'm curious, just among yourselves at the table for the next 30 seconds, talk about what your biggest frustration is right now in your business. Your biggest challenge or your biggest frustration. Why? Because I want you to put words to it. Go ahead and do that real quick. Watch these two, they work with me. All right, everyone come on back. Come on back, folks. Come on back. You don't want me to whistle into the mic. It's ear piercing. I actually learned on Friday that I could actually whistle. I was faking it, and this loud screeching noise came out of my lips. It was pretty cool. The reason on Friday, we did a lot of those types of exercises in this all-day workshop because it's important to put words to what runs through your brain. You want to give it a voice and allow it to be heard. A lot of times, things, they're like, hey, I'm an aggravation, I'm a frustration, pay attention to me. And you just try to keep pushing it away. And as you keep pushing it away, what tends to happen is it gets louder. So give it a voice, which then allows you to actually do something with it. So with that in mind, now I ask you to go ahead and write down your biggest goal for 2014, something that would matter. I also would like you to think of what goal will work for you for the next 90 days. And if there's something that you could write that relates to your 2014 goal, but also will help you to nail that challenge that you have, that you just talked about, your biggest frustration, that would be awesome. So go ahead and write that down for the next 90 days, that goal in that slot. Now I'm going to keep going because what I know is true is that when you are able to take your big dreams or your big goal for the year or your biggest frustration and zero that down into a 90-day period, you can actually move the needle. You can make progress in 90 days. You can stay focused reasonably well in that 90-day period, and it's long enough that you can actually make a difference. Sometimes people say, here's my 5-year strategic plan. 5 years is a long time for a lot of people's brains to handle. So within that 5 years, what would it be this next 12 months? What would it be in the next 90 days? That's 13 weeks. That's not that far, right? Sound okay? So that's the first thing. And then secondly, there's actually 3 types of action that you can take on a daily basis. Not just one, but 3. And when you're able to do that, following those 3 types, it eliminates some of the brute force that we're so good at. Who's good at crossing items off the to-do list, and when there's a result that matters, you make it happen? Raise your hand. Who can make results happen? Who are those get-it-done type of people? Yeah, we want to have that still be the case with the results, but with less brute force and more natural result of the processes you're following. And there are a number of different strategies out there. Act Now is a process. It's a process strategy. But there are content strategies too. When we work with our different businesses, helping them to actually achieve results, a lot of times we're going through content processes. If we're working, as I mentioned, on taking culture and helping businesses get their culture defined the way that they want it to be so that they can have the results that they want in a way that their culture will enable, that's content related. We've got to work from a content perspective. We walk them through a process too. If we're going and diving deep into operations, there's content, there's a knowledge base that you inject into that and a process that you follow. So there are different strategies that are content-based and process-based. You've got to do the process ones well and then inject in new knowledge, inject in new content as you can. That make sense? Awesome. We want to turn what's impossible into possible for you. So, how many of you did set a New Year's resolution this year? Go ahead. What's interesting is, according to the statistics, only 8% of people ever achieve those New Year's resolutions. Only 8%. And only 64% make it 1 month. We're into February, man. They're gone for a lot of you. There's actually daysoftheweek.com, I think is the website, has named January 17th as Ditch Your New Year Resolution Day. And the problem is, New Year's resolutions do not follow any action strategies. They don't. It's something that you do when you've had an extra glass of champagne around midnight, right? And you're feeling pretty good, and everybody's talking about, what are you going to do this year? And that's why it's forgotten so quickly. It's not about being deliberate with, what do I really want? What's going to make me a better person, or what's going to make my company a better business? That's where the strategy part comes into place, where you can put some process that are either content-based or process-based to get you there. Does that make sense? Yeah, we don't want to be random about it. So we're going to turn those dreams that you wrote down into reality, and here's how we're going to do it. On the left side of your fold-out, you can write down these 5 words that begin with the letter C. And we're going to walk through them, so if I go too fast and miss them, we'll catch up with that. Essentially, these are the 5 steps. It starts with cascading, and we began to do that a little bit already when I said take those dreams or take those goals for the year and get them into 90 days. That's the first. Secondly, confirming. I'm going to get into all of these in a minute. I'm sorry, bottom up, top down. Creating. This is creating action plans for each of your goals. Thirdly, committing. Committing to those 3 types of actions every day because they're easy to do with a little bit of focus. Then confirming, and then my favorite, celebrating. Who likes to celebrate? Celebrating is important too, so we're going to get that in place. So cascading those longer-term goals and dreams, think of your business. How many of you have some type of a strategy exercise that you do with your business? Raise your hand. Yeah, a fair number of you, which is great. The larger the companies, the more formal these processes tend to be. The smaller the business, the smaller companies don't always have a formal process. They just think of where do I want to be in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years, and then they start to work it from there. But there's actual exercises where, if you think of the corporate America formula here, it starts with, in the summer months, you're starting to do some type of a business assessment. Where are we versus our goals, and where do we want to take this thing 3 years, 5 years out, right? And then you go back and you create your budget for the year, right? Is this all making sense? Same basic idea, but now how do you get that bigger thing into the next 90 days? And that's what's not always so clear. People don't always do that part well. So how do you get the next 90 days figured out? I'm going to show you this briefly. SMART goals. How many have heard of SMART goals before? Right? SMART goals done right is a little bit of a different feel. We can all read SMART together, right? Specific, measurable. Let's hear it. Achievable, relevant, time-bound. Right. We've heard this is the way to set goals. And there's a lot of truth to that. There's also a little bit more that I want to share with you in this framework. When I went through a program through the Success Coach Institute, they created SMART goals done right. And here's what right stands for. Because the idea of RIGHT adds a little bit more into who you are as a person and how that's relevant to you. So realistic, inspirational, using your gifts in harmony, and that, by the way, is in harmony with your higher purpose in the first place as an individual. And then lastly, time-tested and true, which means that if someone else has pulled it off before, it's possible, and you can pull it off too. So SMART goals done right is the magic behind how to actually set goals in the first place. So let's get in and have some fun. 90 days, long enough to make some impact, short enough to stay focused. Who thinks you can stay focused for the next 3 months? Yes? You got that 90-day goal written down on your piece of paper? Yes? All right, we're going to get you going a little closer, because here's the magic date. If I've looked at the calendar correctly, May 9th is that magic date. Time-bound, we put a date to it. So by May 9th, whatever you've written down, report back. I want to hear what your success was. Okay, now, the next step, create. The next C is create an action plan behind each one of the goals. How many of you have ever written an action plan for anything before? Yes? Awesome. Because if you don't, you're just a pinball in the pinball machine. You say, this is an important goal, and then, oops, you randomly, maybe it will happen. And the reality is, as we said, when you write down your goals, your performance actually goes up and the chances of you hitting it improves. Well, that's all true, even though sometimes people don't write action plans. That's still true because you're making a commitment in your brain, and your unconscious mind goes to work on your behalf. So there's a lot of good to that. But actually thinking through the steps. Now the little graphic up here, this is a pretty detailed action plan. It doesn't have to be that detailed. It can be relatively simple. The idea of drafting out the plan gives you something to shoot for. Even if, this is good news for a lot of you, even if what you end up following does not equal exactly what you wrote in your plan. But the idea of having a plan and getting going so that you have an idea what to do next, get started. So what's in that threefold right now is write down 3 steps towards that 90-day goal. What are 3 things that you know right now you need to do that are going to get you that 90-day goal? And go ahead and write them down. Because the same phenomenon that happens when people ink their goals rather than just thinking about them happens when you write them down on a piece of paper. There's a commitment that happens in your brain, and it starts to become a little bit more real. By the way, it becomes really real when you share your plan with someone else. And you even get to the point where you're making these commitments and you're reporting back, and here's how I'm doing. Here's the progress I'm making. So real simple. What are the steps? By when will you do them? You can do that? So next, commit. All 3 types of action. Here's where it gets really exciting. Because these 3 types of action are all very simple. This circle framework, the circle that will change your results, it begins on a daily basis with what's my clear intention for today? What's the result I want, or what is it that I want to experience today? Then, my planned actions, my daily habits, and my inspired actions, all working together to get me the results that I want. And here's how they work. It starts with a process that Jack Canfield calls the rule of 5. Simply, what are the 5 things related to your most important goal that you're going to do today? These don't have to be big, monstrous tasks. They could be relatively simple. Make the phone call. Follow up with someone. Spend 30 minutes on thinking through the strategy or planning or whatever it might be. But go ahead and make sure that there's 5 things that you do on a daily basis. Secondly, these daily habits, we're going to just run through them real quick. Let me load them all up, actually. That's probably the best way to do it. There are a number of success accelerators that have come through time that have demonstrated to make a difference. How many of you have ever heard of visualizing your goals? How many of you watch the Olympics? Every single Olympic athlete, you can almost see their eyes before they're ready to launch. I love this time of year. You know, the skiers up there, they're maybe next to get into the gate, and their eyes are closed, and right? You can see them do this. They're going through that downhill course in their mind. They're visualizing exactly what they want. You hear stories about golfers who say, I think it was Jack Nicholson, yes? Nicholas, as opposed to the other guy. Here's Johnny. Pick your sport. Doesn't ever address the ball and swing unless what? Visualize the ball going and doing exactly what he wants the ball to do. Right? That's the power of visualization. Affirmations are simply positively stated present tense words that describe the picture in your brain for your visualization. Then things like exercising and meditating and reading, these are all things that are powerful, demonstrated again to actually make a huge difference. Letting go, these are when you're absolutely tied up in your head and you're mad about something and you're just like, how many of you have been mad for days? Right? How's your performance during that time? It's not easy to be working at peak performance. You got to learn, there's some methods, learn to just drop your issues. So those are the daily habits. Now, what I want to do, everyone stand up real quick. Just do a quick visualization experiment. What I want you to do is pick a spot. Everyone, just shoulder width apart, put your feet shoulder width apart, stand comfortably, and take one of your arms, and do this as long as you do not have an arm injury or back injury, and you're going to come after us later. But go ahead and take one of your arms straight out in front of you. So if everyone has their right arm, I'm going to do this with my left, so that I'll demonstrate this with a mirror image. And I want everyone with their feet exactly where they are to turn with your arm across your body. Keep your feet where they are. And go as far as you possibly can, and point your hand to wherever it goes. And I want you to just notice where you're pointing, the wall spot, and look at that wall spot and notice everything about the wall. Where are you pointing? Is it a part of the mirror? Is it a seam in one of the curtains? What is it? Is it part of the window? And lock that into your brain and notice what's a little bit on either side of that spot. Okay, now everyone come back to the room, right in the front. Put your arm down a second. Just take a moment, close your eyes, and see the spot that you just saw. Well, what I want you to do, your goal, is to go further this time. And what I want you to do is, with your eyes closed, actually see the spot, yet see your arm and your hand pointing a little bit further than you went last time. See that spot and anchor that in with your arm and your fingers pointing to that spot. Now go ahead and open your eyes. We're going to stick our arms out again. Ready? And this time, your goal is to go further than you did last time. I want you to go, everyone turn your body, keep your feet anchored exactly where they were, and see if you can go as far as you can, further than you did last time. And when you've done, come on back to the front of the room and go ahead and sit down. So how'd that work out? Right, show of hands, who went further the second time? Now, but wait a minute, the first time you went as far as you could go. Now how does that work? You went as far as you could go, but you followed some of the processes that we know work, like visualization, that's just one of them, and got a better result the second time. Is that cool? Happens like that with any goal you set. So if you think about the processes in your business, your revenue, your financials, you can think about your service to your customers, you can think about your personal goals in the way of your career, or your finance, or your health and fitness, your relationships, your overall happiness, whatever it might be, they all work. This set of processes work. Now here's what's interesting, the inspired actions, we all get the $1 million idea. Who's ever had the $1 million idea before? Yeah, look at all these self-made millionaires in the room, right? The problem most of us have is we don't follow them through. And that's what inspired action is all about. Inspired action is when you get the idea, you do something. You just do something. You might log it down because your day is full and you write it down so that you can actually do something with it tomorrow. Sometimes the $1 million idea is as simple as you're working on some problem and you're not sure what to do and you're stuck, and then ta-da, the idea moment, right? The light bulb moment. You get an intuitive hit. And you're like, that's what I got to do. Right? And then you can keep going. You solve the problem at that point. Does that make sense? Now, why do we even get intuitive hits in the first place? Any idea? Because of the daily habits. That collection on that list of daily habits, what they're doing is they're creating an environment by which you can now see ideas come to you. The light bulb moment comes more frequently than it did before, or shouts louder than it did before. You might not have ever noticed it, but they were always there. Every single person in this room has had the $1 million idea on multiple occasions. Multiple occasions, maybe even daily. That's the power of doing some of these other things on a daily basis, setting up an environment so that you can hear the whisper as it comes in. So the three types of action were planned actions, Daily habits and inspired actions. Go ahead, and if you haven't, write those down on your sheet of paper. The next step is confirming your progress using the daily action log. And this is essentially the process that we just talked about. What do I intend to do today? Or what's the experience or the result I intend to have? What are my 5 planned steps? What are all those daily habits? Just making sure you're tracking them. And then when the light bulb moment comes up, you're able to grab it. Then, of course, it's summarizing on a weekly basis, because if every day of the week you're making a lot of check marks, you get some feedback to how you're doing. So that's what Confirm is all about. By the way, the forms are all available on dailyactionlog.com. Yes, they're in the book, but you can go and download them. We email you the PDFs, so you can go ahead and do that. Now, we said celebrate is fun, right? Celebrate and make adjustments, because you want to see what's working. And if whatever's working, do more of that, because that's where you really get a lot of power. Things that aren't working as well, you can adjust them. You can figure out what you need to do differently, because life is a set of experience. You experiment with something and see what kind of results you get. You experiment with something else, see what kind of results you get. Does that make sense? So we want you to have a muscle memory that you develop with this skill called goal achievement. Not just for you, by the way. This is for your team as well. Think of how you can expand your results by developing a team of people who are great at achieving their goals. How cool is that? Because that does happen. So the same way, has anyone ever learned tennis or golf or any other music instrument? First day you put the golf club in your hand, you're awful. Who's an awful golfer? Admit it, right? But you still go out every now and then, don't you? Because it's a fun game. But there are so many different variables. Anyone ever take lessons before? Yeah, I mean, you take lessons, you start working with a coach. I had a place that had the golf club itself had through the bottom a little laser light, and there was a piece of tape on the floor so that when you did your backswing, the laser pointed to whether or not your swing is on plane. So you want to have that perfect golf swing on plane all the time. It worked magic. I mean, this is probably 10 or 15 years ago now, but when I was working with that process, building muscle memory so that my muscles were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, there were times when 150 yards out, I would hit and that iron would bounce against the pin. That doesn't happen anymore because my muscle memory's kind of gone. But the point is, that's what we're doing when we're developing these habits and continuing to develop through. Building muscle memory through your goal achievement processes. So I want to ask you, what is one thing that you can do today that will move you forward? You've written some things down. What's the today thing to go and actually go and do? Think through that. Now, the interesting thing is, in order to make any of this stuff work, there's a very important element, and that is your belief. Where is your belief? There's a formula, C plus B equals A, which stands for what you can conceive and believe you can achieve. Anyone know where that comes from? Everyone hear of a man named Napoleon Hill? Napoleon Hill wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. He had some guidance and coaching from Andrew Carnegie, who at that time was the richest man in the world, right? Andrew Carnegie kind of knows what he's talking about. And how do you think he got that way? This is one of the things that he followed, was a set of processes that are pretty darn similar to what I just described here from a process standpoint, with a lot of content in there too. Remember, content and process both matter, right? Andrew Carnegie asked Napoleon Hill if he'd be willing to go and study the most successful people on the planet at that point in time. And he did, and he summarized it in a book called Think and Grow Rich, and it was one of quite a few that he ended up writing. And I summarized that book as C plus B equals A, because these are his words. What the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So belief is a big deal. Because if you believe that you are not going to get any better than you are now, your results aren't going to happen, you believe that the economy is going to hold you back, you believe that you're not going to find the right employees, well, guess what? You're going to have a really tough time. If you believe from a positive standpoint that it doesn't matter what the economy's doing, I'm doing great, I've got my act together, my customers love me, they're going to come back, they're going to refer, right? You see how this builds? And what is your set of beliefs? We spent a lot of time talking about this in a longer day. You know, what are your beliefs? What positive beliefs can you put in place? So C plus B equals A. Go ahead and write that down because that's certainly part of the magic here. So one thing I'd like to share is, we have those. Thank you. One thing I'd like to share is the team and I, Kelly and Jen and Jeanette and David, will be in the room for a while as we wrap up. One of the things that we did on Friday last week is, in addition to the consulting services, there's a coaching service that we're launching. It's relatively new. And if you are interested, please do see us over at the table, because we're setting it up in a way now that is helpful to get people launched using the Act Now process and the Act Now methodology. And with that, the last thing before I take questions is there are feedback forms there. We take feedback very seriously. We practice what we preach from a continuous improvement standpoint. We want to know how we're doing, what can we do differently, what did you love. We're going to share this with Charity because she designs the program and wants to know that it went very well. What are you whispering to me?
It's Charity's.
Yep, you bet. So it's there on the table. Are there any questions? What a quiet group. Everybody wants to run back and go to work now, right? I'm finished eating. I've heard what I need. Now I've got to go to the office and start crossing things off my to-do list.
Get us motivated.
That's it. That's right. Anything? Yes, Margie.
Is a to-do list effective?
Great question. Is a to-do list effective? A to-do list is very important. The question is, what do you put on your to-do list? Right? How many of you are to-do list people and like to cross items off the list? There's nothing wrong with that. The problem comes in when you've built your to-do list with busy items that do not align with your most important goal. So if you feel really good about the progress you've made, and then you go home at the end of the day and you realize, well, my 3 top important items I didn't touch today, but I did stop and get milk on the way home because it was on the list, right? I put out all of these other fires that other people raised for me, and I feel good about the service I provided. But what about the goals that you have, and are you chipping away at them on a daily basis? So that's where that rule of 5 comes in. That's a little bit different than just your tracking method. I want everyone to have super high personal productivity because it just helps you to get more stuff done through the course of the day. There's a great book called Getting Stuff Done that talks about things like lists and organizing and whatnot. What I'd like to add into the mix is just make sure you're being really deliberate and prioritizing some of the most important goals that you have. You decided what's important to you. Now just make sure you're doing something with them every day. Thank you. Yes?
One of the things that I heard you say when you spoke at the public library at Simsbury was if your goal in a day is to make 5 phone calls, is it 5 phone calls or is it 5 conversations? And that's a big deal. Because we can all make 5 phone calls and leave voicemails, but to have 5 conversations with customers following up or new phone calls or things like that, that's where I think the goal at the end of the day can either be satisfying or empty.
Thank you, Pam. Yes. Here's what's interesting. We have our own internal little demons we have to conquer as you go, right? Whatever they are. I'll have an example now. We talked about the book story, and I mentioned earlier that there's a TV story attached to that. I'm actually working with a media coach, helping to develop the skill called pitching the media, getting on TV, and then looking good, not like an idiot, when you're actually on. And in November and December, I think I've been on 5 or 6 times, which is really cool, just around the local Hartford and New Haven market. And I have a coaching call on Monday. I have homework to pitch the media twice before Monday. And I knew I was going to be here today. I got the weekend, so I'm like, yesterday, I had to pitch the media. I'm like, there's nothing going on in the media except snow. What am I going to talk about there? And so I had this, as Pam described, the difference between making a call versus having a conversation. Well, ideally, the real goal of making a pitch is to get on. I mean, that's the goal. I had this internal demon. I had to slay the dragon because I was like, oh man, I'm talking myself out of it, right? I'm so busy. I've got to prepare for the chamber meeting. I've got these other client things I've got to follow up on. What if they call? Then what do I do? Where do I fit that in my busy schedule? So I'm going through all this in my mind, and I had this list of phone numbers, all these different news desks, and I wouldn't dial the darn phone. You ever do that? I mean, that's just my example, but you're going to follow up. Call the prospect. Call someone who waved their hand at you and said, hey, I'm interested in your service. Right? Somehow we talk ourselves out of it. Well, I'll tell you what happened. As soon as I dialed the phone and had the conversation, news desk, hi, you got time for a pitch? It wasn't that great in how eloquently it came out of my mouth, but the next one was, and the next one after that. And they all said, please email the story. So part of me is like, yes, they're not calling me in right now, which is kind of cool. Maybe they'll call me in next week when I have more time. But the point of the story is you get into the groove, you get into the mode quickly by just starting, just taking action. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time out. Just go. There's a hand back here. Go ahead.
How do you utilize this to more effectively get teams of people or committees working more effectively together to achieve focused results?
Thank you. I'll repeat that. How do you use this process to get teams or committees to be more effective in achieving a result? Thank you for that, because this process works as us as individuals, and we as individuals are business leaders, and we have teams, and we have people that we're trying to coordinate and get to results. So the first part is practice it and demonstrate it. Through the dialogue that you have, you'll be able to draw people in, and they'll have this osmosis effect of your positive results. Secondly is teach them. Teach them the idea of how to set goals correctly. Work on action plans together. You can go to the flip chart or the dry erase board in your conference room and say, okay, folks, here's the goal. Let's talk about the steps and who's got what, right? So you get that. And then lastly, you can demonstrate and teach all 3 types of action and draw it out, because people will sometimes say, what do you mean this inspired action thing? You don't even have to use that language. Just say, anybody have any ideas? What other ideas? What other ideas? And draw it out that way. Thank you for that.
We need to make that our last question.
You bet. Thank you, everyone. We'll be here afterwards.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.